Hi, and welcome to this week's Ask Me Anything About Summer Camp, the series that I've been doing on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time to talk about some of the common questions parents have leading up to summer camp. So today's question is, what are some good questions to ask when you're selecting a camp program or trying to decide if a program is a good match for your child and your family? There are a lot of great resources on this, and after this recording is done, I will put a link up on my website at sunshine-parenting.com, and it will include a download with all of these questions, so you don't need to take notes while listening today. So there's a couple things. If you're not really familiar with camp or you never went yourself, you may not really know even where to start when asking and trying to find out about a program. I would say the very first place to start is to figure out what the focus and philosophy of the program is. And that can often be done by going to the camp's website and watching their video if they have one, or reading testimonials from campers and parents and staff about what people gain from the experience at that program. So I think that's kind of a fundamental starting point. You want to make sure you're selecting a camp program where the values and the focus are in alignment with what you're wanting for your child. So that's number one. Figure out what the camp is all about and if it's a good match for your program. The second question, or maybe it should be the first, I don't know, is the camp accredited by the American Camp Association? So the American Camp Association is the only organization that accredits camps in the United States. And by being accredited, camps allow visitors to come in and look through things like their staff certification records and their staff ratio requirements and health requirements and all kinds of things that really are a good assurance for parents that this camp is meeting the industry safety and health standards for a camp. So I highly recommend that you look at whether a camp is accredited or not. Before I continue, I just want to make sure that you know the reason I selected this topic for today. So last week's podcast episode was episode 88, Preventing Abuse, which I recorded with Tommy Feldman, who's the director of Camp Granite Lake. Tommy has a really excellent education and resource program for his campers and their parents. And I put some links to that in the show notes for episode 88. And I'll also put a link in the post related to this particular question. But one of the things that came up in our podcast interview was how important it is for parents to feel comfortable asking lots of questions. If you're going to trust a camp or a school or a babysitter with your child, you really need to get comfortable with feeling like you can ask any questions that you might have. And contrary to what some people might think, camp directors really like getting questions. So earlier this year, I did a podcast episode with a panel of camp directors. I was at the American Camp Association conference, and we had complete consensus that we would all rather have a nice long chat with the parents and answer all their questions and make sure they're feeling comfortable with everything. So I highly encourage you to call up the camp or email or however you want and ask the questions that you have before your child gets there. So anyway, going back to my questions. I really like to know the background of the leaders of the camp. Many times, camp directors either have been in the camp profession for a long time or have also been educators or worked in other settings. But it's interesting to know both their years of experience and their backgrounds. I think that shows a lot about a program, especially programs that have leadership that has been going on for a long time. That can be reassuring that these are leaders who really know the program and have established the guidelines that the staff and campers follow. So another question that I think is really important because it can vary at camps is, what is the minimum age requirement of staff and what qualifications do camp staff need to have? Sometimes camps have younger staff who serve in either assistant or junior counselor roles, which can be perfectly fine. But you really want to know who is in charge, who's going to be the main staff members in charge of your children, and what is their background and age and qualifications. Another thing that I think is really important to ask is who attends the camp. So, what age group does the camp serve? Where do the kids come from? What different backgrounds do they come from? Is there any one particular geographical area that is kind of the main where the camp draws most of its campers from? Are there any international campers? Those are really fun questions to ask, because I do think this is something that can really vary from program to program. There are camps that are highly concentrated with, mostly kids from one school or neighborhood, and there are camps that have a more diverse group of campers participating. Um, Another question that I think is, most parents wouldn't think to ask if you're not familiar with how camp programs are structured, but how much is about activities and how kids do activities. They could sign up for all their activities as individuals, and that requires the child to have the autonomy to sign up and know what activities might interest them. They could be participating as a group with and be scheduled to activities, or it could be some combination of free choice and structured scheduled activities. It's good to know about that, because depending on your child's personality, you really want to make sure that your child's going to get the experience that you want them to have. So if you have a kid that holds back a bit, if it's all free choice, it might be something that might deter them from trying some new things. But if you have a camper who really is just very focused on one particular thing, then perhaps they want to be able to be at a place where they can just focus on that one activity or area that they want to work on. Another question, and these just go in the realm of kind of talking about how the staff are trained at the program. And I think those are, if you ask how the camp handles homesickness. So, what are their kind of the steps they take? Who are the staff members who assist kids who are struggling with adjusting to camp? I think that's a really good question to ask. Another one I think is equally important, and that is, what training do the staff have, and what are the procedures that staff are trained to follow when there's a conflict between campers or some kind of behavioral issue? So basically, what happens when kids are misbehaving or not doing the right thing? And then kind of following up on that, what are the behavioral guidelines for the program? And, what would be a case where a camper wouldn't be allowed to stay at the program? So what are the behaviors that are not allowed at the camp? And how does the camp handle it if a camper arrives at the camp and is unable to meet the camp's standards of behavior? I think that's really important, because sometimes, you first of all, you want to make sure that your child is ready for the guidelines. Oftentimes the camp will have you review the behavioral guidelines with your camper before camp and make sure that you're both clear on what the requirements are. Often these relate to things like treating other people with respect, and not doing any teasing or bullying kind of behaviors with other kids. So I think it's important to ask, and often this is also listed somewhere on the camp's website, what their behavioral guidelines are for campers. All right. A few other things to think about when you're talking to a camp and asking questions. One is just thinking about your own child. I've always thought of kids as all having some kind of special need or special personality. And it's important to ask specifically if the camp has had other campers with similar needs and how that's been accommodated and how it worked out. So, for example, if your child has a food allergy, what are the steps that the camp can take? What are things that have worked at school? And is the camp willing to accommodate whatever the special need is in that area with allergies? Same thing with any kind of medical issue. Oftentimes, camps do have a camp nurse or doctor and can accommodate kids with medical issues, even if it's not a camp specifically designed for that medical issue. But it's really important for you to check and make sure that you're really clear on what the camp is able to help your camper with and what medications or health procedures your camper will be responsible for him or herself. So I think that's a really important reason to call. Also, there's just all kinds of other things that it's important to point out to the camp. Sometimes a camper has been through some kind of hard year in some way, maybe a death in the family or a move or something that has just created some unsettling feelings and maybe some withdrawal or different behaviors. It's important that you talk to the camp and let them know ahead of time anything that's been going on, and make sure that the staff who will be working with your child just know to keep their eye out on different behaviors that you have identified as a signal that the camper needs some assistance of some sort, like a chat or some time to rest or time away from the group. All of those things are really helpful. You're the expert on your child, and for your child to have the best opportunity to have a great experience at camp, it's really important that you share with the camp any information that is going to help them accommodate your child and make sure that they just have a really, really positive experience at camp. Another question kind of related to that one is, what are the medical procedures at your camp? Who's in charge of giving kids medicine or helping out when they have some kind of illness or injury? Are those medical staff on site, or is there a clinic or somewhere nearby that you take campers? Those are great questions to ask. I really like to know too, and I think it's a good question, is how many kids are in each group and how many counselors or staff members are with that group. Generally, it varies by age. With more staff, the younger the group is. So for younger ages, there tend to be more staff, and as kids get older, they obviously still require supervision, but usually not as much. And another question that I think is good to ask is, what are times of day when the buddy system is used? So the buddy system is used at just about every camp, and those are times when campers are allowed to, go with a buddy to, go to the camp store or to walk to their activity or to go to meals or to go to the restroom. So there's different times of day where the buddy system is in place, and I think it's a good question to ask is, when are counselors with the kids and when is the buddy system used at the camp? Another question you might consider asking is, do the counselors at the camp live in the same tent or cabin or dorm with the kids? So there's all different setups for how housing works at camps, and sometimes camps are, for example, on a college campus, and kids are in dorm rooms, so the staff actually aren't with them in their same room, but they might be nearby. It's good to just have an understanding of how close the supervision is during those overnight times and times when kids are not at activities. So I like to ask, I think that's a good question to ask, is, do the counselors live in the same place with the campers? I think in general, depending on what activities are offered at the camp, asking about what safety guidelines are followed. And this again kind of goes back to that accreditation question. If the camp is accredited, they are following some of the kind of highest standards of safety. For example, wearing life jackets during all boating activities and that type of thing. But depending on what activities they offer, you can just ask, what are the safety guidelines that you follow or the precautions that you take at a particular activity? Going back to Tommy and my podcast session from last week, episode 88, one of the important questions to ask is, in what situations at the program are any staff members alone one-on-one with campers? That's a very important question because it lets you know what the camp's policies are regarding one-on-one interactions between staff and campers. Also related to last week's podcast episode is the question, what screening is done of staff and what training do you do to prevent really any kind of abuse of campers, whether it's, sexual abuse or physical abuse or emotional abuse. So this is something that obviously camps take very seriously and have extensive training on, or really need to have extensive training. So asking about that is a great question, and camps who have a thorough screening and training process would love to talk to you about it and answer all of your questions. Finally, the question that I think is really important, if you don't already know a few families whose children have attended the program, I think it's really important to get the names of a few families you can contact as references. Now, of course, the camp's going to give references of families that like the program, but I think that it's really important to have a conversation with someone else who's experienced the program that is not someone who works at the camp. So I think that's another great question. So all of these questions I have on a PDF that you can download, and it will be available on my website soon. But I hope you enjoyed this Ask Me Anything session, Ask Me Anything about summer camp. I will continue to do these for the next few weeks at 1:00 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday afternoons. And I'd love to answer any questions that you have leading up to camp this summer. You can either email me at audrey@sunshine-parenting.com. You can comment here, or you can also use the voice recorder that's available on my website at sunshine-parenting.com. And you can just record a question that I could answer on one of these Ask Me Anything or on a post on my website. If you are still thinking about summer camp for this summer and haven't signed your child up yet, now you have some great questions to ask as you peruse the different camps. I also really want to make sure that you check out the wonderful programs that are featured on my Happy Campers interview series. I'll put a link to that under here, and I really hope that you'll look into these fabulous programs that are all accredited by the American Camp Association and dedicated to enriching the lives of kids through focusing on not just teaching kids recreational and fun outdoor activities, but really helping teach kids important social skills and character traits that just will help them have great, thriving adulthoods. So thanks for listening to this Ask Me Anything About Summer Camp, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.